Qroo here. Welcome to the first lesson in my Spanish Master Course. As an English speaker, you already have a huge advantage when it comes to learning Spanish because you already speak a language that has nouns, verbs, prepositions, just like Spanish does. Another big advantage you have as an English speaker is that English and Spanish share a lot of the same linguistic roots, especially when it comes to vocabulary. That means you can actually learn some cognate tricks to be able to convert a ton of your English vocabulary over to Spanish so you don't have to memorize individual words. You're going to love that part of it. This course is taught from an English speaker's perspective. That means I'm going to be comparing Spanish to your English, really capitalizing on the similarities between the two languages. And when something's different, and there's going to be a lot of aspects that are different, or, well, it would be English. When we're working with those aspects of the language that are different, I'm going to explain them in a way so it relates to your English. I'm also going to show you how to break those things down, those aspects of the language, into patterns that you can learn and repeat, with different vocabulary in it. So, well, you can say whatever you want. I'm not teaching you how to be a parrot. I'm teaching you how to be conversational in Spanish. You'll understand what I mean by the end of lesson 2. Even if you're an absolute beginner to Spanish, you will be translating sentences on your own by the end of lesson 2. I promise you. One more thing before we kick this off. People often ask me if I'm teaching Latin American Spanish or European Spanish. The focus of this course is on Latin American Spanish because that's what I speak. However, that doesn't mean that the information is not useful to students focusing on European Spanish. You're still going to be able to use the patterns that I'm going to show you to fast track your learning of the language. Now, whenever there's a fundamental difference between Latin American Spanish and European Spanish, I'm going to point those out. I may say it out loud in the video, or I may just put something on the screen. So for you folks studying European Spanish, watch the screen, all right? Well, that's the end of the introduction. Now I'm going to talk about Spanish pronunciation. You got to get your fundamentals down, folks. And I'm also going to show you the AL cognate trick. Take a look at the English words on the screen. Animal, legal, social, criminal, digital, final, formal, individual, normal, hospital, judicial. Sorry, folks, losing my voice a little bit here today. I'm going to convert all of those words into Spanish. It's going to be pretty easy. Look at the screen, watch it, watch it. There they are. Those are all Spanish, folks, but you may never have recognized them when you've heard them in Spanish because they're pronounced differently. And it really comes down to pronouncing the vowels differently. Animal, legal, social, criminal, digital, final, formal, individual, normal, hospital, judicial. See, they didn't sound the same. That's why you didn't recognize them. But if you see them written, obviously you know what they are. Those words I just showed you are known as cognates. Cognates are words between two languages that share common roots. They may be exactly the same as we're seeing here, or they may be similar. And normally when they're similar, they're still going to follow some type of a pattern. So once you learn the pattern, you can convert a ton of your English vocabulary over into Spanish. I'm going to be showing you a lot of those fantastic cognate tricks all through the course. This is a simple one. It's just one we're going to use when we're playing with Spanish pronunciation. I'm going to tell you, when it comes to Spanish pronunciation, it's a phonetic language. If you can see it, you can say it. The key to perfecting your Spanish pronunciation is to really focus on those 5 vowels. Let's kick this thing off with the letter A. It is always going to sound like A, animal. See, you have 2 A's in there, exact same sound no matter where it is in the word. Now the E sounds like E, central, central. The I sounds like a hard E. Digital, digital. The O sounds like a really hard O. Hospital, hospital. Now the U sounds like U, like in moon, moon, U. Musical, musical. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some consonants here. And if you don't know what a consonant is, it's, well, the letters that aren't vowels. So let's start with the letter C. The letter C will normally have a sound like the letter K in English. It'll be a hard K sound, except when it's before an I or an E. In that case, it's going to sound like an English S. So first the hard K sound, capital, canal. And then when it appears before an E or an I, it's going to sound like an S, central, cielo, central, cielo. Normally G is going to have a really hard G sound like in the English word gone. Global, gradual. G before an I or an E is going to sound like an English H. Digital. Now let's talk about the letter Y. This one's going to sound a little bit different depending on what region you're in. Through the majority of the Spanish-speaking world, it's going to sound somewhere between an English Y and an English J. The Spanish word for I is yo. It could be pronounced like yo or yo, depending on where you're at. Now, if you're in the southern cone, that Y sound is going to sound more like an SH sound. They're going to say things like sho, sho. Let's talk about the double L sound. This is going to be pronounced just like that Y. So the same rules are going to apply. Next one on our list is a Z, as in zebra. In Latin America, this is going to be pronounced exactly like S. Makes it pretty easy, right? Let's move on to H. H doesn't have any sound in Spanish. It is silent. So when you see the word hospital in English and you want to convert it over to Spanish, the H still stays there. You just don't pronounce it. Hospital, hospital. Remember to really hit those O's and those I's. Let's move on to a J. J sounds like an English H. So you might be like, well, why didn't they just keep the H? I don't know, folks. Probably the best example of this would be like a name. Jose. Everybody's heard the name Jose, right? Jose. Next one is going to be the N with a little squiggle over it. It's called an enye. And it's going to be pronounced like the N in the English word onion. Good example of this is mañana, which means tomorrow. Mañana. Let's talk about the letter Q. It's going to be pronounced like a K in English, and it's always going to be followed by a silent U. Here's an example. Que. You're going to be hearing this word a lot. Que. What? Let's move on to the letter V as in Victor. It's going to be pronounced like a very soft B, like in the name Ben. In fact, the B and V in Spanish are going to have the same pronunciation. El vino. Vino, right? Not vino. Vino. Let's move on to R and double R. These are the ones that are going to give English speakers the most trouble. We'll start with that single R. Now, single R is actually going to have a couple of different sounds. Which one you choose is going to depend on where it is in the word. When the R is at the beginning of the word, you're going to have to hit that trill. Raton, raton. That's for mouse. We'll use one of our AL cognates. This one might surprise you. Real, real. And this means real or royal. It's all about context. Now, when R is in the middle of the word and it follows either an N, an L, or an S, it still tends to have that trill, although some people might kind of lose it, just depends, especially if you're an English speaker. Alrededor and enredado. Now, when R appears anywhere else in the word, it tends to be that soft R, which is pronounced more like a tap on the roof of your mouth. Caro, caro. And that means expensive. See, I'm not saying carro, because if I said carro, that would be a car. And this is caro. Here's another example. Pero, which means but in Spanish, like B-U-T, but. Pero. Now, if I stretched it out, it'd become perro. And that's a completely different word. It means dog. In fact, while we're getting to that rolling R's, let's go ahead and jump into double R's. When you see double R's in a word, it's going to have a R sound. So what I'm doing is taking my tongue, putting it on the roof of my mouth, near the front of my mouth, and just letting it bounce a little. R, R, R. That's what I'm doing. And sometimes it can help to actually make the sound without a word. You know, R, just get used to that bounce. And then add some word around it. Perro, perro. You know, I occasionally hear from viewers who will write me and be like, you know, Paul, I just can't hit these R's. I can't get any trill there. Am I ever going to be able to speak Spanish? Yes. Just keep at it, you know, and you're going to get better at it. And if you have trouble with it and you're not hitting it, there are areas in the world where they don't really hit a hard R all the time, like Costa Rica. So you can just tell people you're focusing on Costa Rican Spanish, and that's why your R's sound like that. I'm just saying, could be something. Let's talk about where to put the stress in the Spanish words. Because you don't want to put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, do you? Because then it doesn't sound like a word anybody recognizes. Well, the good news here is that Spanish has very clear-cut rules where to put the emphasis, and it breaks down into 3 categories. 3 things to remember, folks. Pretty easy. The first category are words ending in a vowel or the letters N or S. The stress in these words will be on the next to last syllable. Not the last one, the next to last syllable. Camisas. Pelo, anillo, perro, The next category is going to be words ending in other letters. That's other than vowels and N or S. The stress in these words will be on the very last syllable. Bailar, hospital, legal, verdad. Our last category will be accent marks. One nice thing about Spanish is that it's going to follow the rules in those first two categories, and when it deviates, they're going to put an accent mark over the vowel. That's where you're going to put the stress in the word. Here's an example. Justificación, justificación, justification. Pájaros, pájaros. See that accent over the A? That's where we're going to put our stress. Pájaros. Well, those are the basics of Spanish pronunciation. I know this lesson was boring, but the next one is going to be much better, I promise you. I'm going to be showing you the best cognate trick of them all, and you're going to be translating simple sentences on your own from English to Spanish by the end of that lesson, even if you've never had any Spanish before. I promise you, that one's going to be awesome. So if you're not too tired yet, why not jump over there to lesson 2? You don't want to put that off. I'll see you over there.